Well, hello, Dr. Lopez. We've heard so much about you and your achievements, and we're thrilled to be here with you.
Well, thanks. I'm happy to be here with you too.
So we're anchors at our school's broadcasting team, and I'm Evelyn.
And I'm Karen.
We'd like for you to introduce yourself, Doctor.
Hi, I'm Dr. Ramon Lopez, Professor of Physics at the University of Texas at Arlington.
So would you be okay with us beginning with questions?
Sure.
Okay. So oftentimes, being a minority in any way, whether that be gender, age, sexual orientation, ethnicity, etc., individuals find that being a minority, impacts the way people around them view them. Did you ever feel as if you were looked down upon, or even on the contrary, praised for being a successful Latino in STEM?
Looked down upon, no. And then, no, it's kind of strange because maybe in part it depends on the community that you're in and the kind of people that you work with. Many of my friends and colleagues, I mean, they look at my name and they know, right? But some of them, it's really funny. Sometimes some of them are surprised to find out that I speak Spanish fluently, for instance, and they don't always process the background of people. And so, no, I don't think that it has ever held me back in any way. On the other hand, actually, I think I've gotten a few advantages, particularly in working with colleagues in Latin America or in Spain, right? Because if you speak the language, it helps a lot. I also speak Portuguese. I go down to Brazil a lot.
That's nice. All right.
And so for any of your students actually who grew up speaking more than one language, it's a hidden advantage. And definitely you can use that to your personal advantage in whatever career that you follow. You've got exposure to other culture and, and then again, another language. Science is very international. You see the picture of Rome here, of the Colosseum in Rome in the background. I took that actually just a few weeks ago because I was in Rome for a scientific conference. And yeah, science, especially space science, I'm a space scientist, is a very international business. And so you get to meet people from many, many different cultures. So having experience with more than one culture yourself is an advantage.
So I guess, what would you say are a few advantages or disadvantages in your field as a professor or researcher?
Advantages or disadvantages of being a professor as a job, do you mean? Or did I understand the question? Can you repeat the question? Let's see, I think I misunderstood.
We already established that you're bilingual or trilingual, as you would say. Have there been any advantages or disadvantages, you would say, as a professor in this field, or researcher, I mean?
Well, sure, there are advantages in speaking more than one language as a professor, absolutely, because again, science is very international. And then the fact that I grew up speaking both Spanish and English. My parents were born and raised in Puerto Rico. I was born in this country, but most of the family was back there. And when I was a kid, we used to go for extended visits and stay there for long periods of time. So I grew up speaking both Spanish and English, and actually that made it that was helpful in learning other languages because I also studied French and Russian, and being able to speak more than one language originally helps with other languages. And with French, being a Latin-based language, there are some similarities there. And Portuguese was very easy for me to learn. And I've learned a little bit of Italian too. That wasn't so hard because it's very close in many ways. So, those kinds of things when you go to another country can be very, very helpful in terms of just maneuvering and getting around. and also in establishing personal relationships with scientists in other countries, because those relationships are really important to the functioning of science, having that network. Now, that's one area where a lot of minority students have real disadvantages, because maybe they don't have that network through their families of people telling them, you should do this, you should do that. Like if you're the first generation going to college, who in your family is going to be able to help you navigate that and tell you what are the things you should be doing, or things to watch out for? So that social network is really very, very important. But as far as, advantages or disadvantages in being a professor, I think that I've gotten advantages from having the bicultural background, particularly at a place like UT Arlington, which is a Hispanic serving institution. And there is a network, actually, a national network of Hispanic physicists, and we have a society, the National Society of Hispanic Physicists. I'm the past president of that right now. We just had elections, and I finally could retire as president. I'm past president now.
Well, piggybacking off like your talk about your love of science, how did you become involved in science, specifically like being physics oriented? Did your upbringing, I know you weren't particularly born in like a Hispanic country, you were born in Illinois, I think, right?
Well,
but did that correlate or impact like your ambition
okay, so my parents were both educated, and my father was a surgeon and my mother was a teacher. And it's from my mother that I think I got the interest in being a teacher. And actually both my children are teachers as well. My daughter right now is living in Japan teaching English as a second language. And my son is teaching political philosophy and political theory at Clemson University. So, from my mother, I got the love of teaching, the interest in teaching, but from both my parents, I mean, the most important thing my parents told me was that doing well in school and academics was critical, because both of them came from meager circumstances, right? But they both achieved what they achieved through education. So I was always prompted to be interested in things like that. But it was when I was a kid that I got super interested in science, and especially space, because that was the time of the Apollo space missions. I was a kid when the first moon landing happened. For you guys, that's ancient history. But for me, I was 10 years old, and I had a brand new telescope, which I had really been agitating for all year long until my birthday came. And I got this little telescope that was just a cardboard tube and a reflector and a lens, but it was huge to me. And I would run inside and look at them on the TV, and then go outside and look at the moon through the telescope. Wow, they're really there. So, those kinds of things made a real impression on me, which is why in the end I went into space science. But I was always interested in science. And then in like middle school and especially high school, I decided I was going to study physics. My parents thought that was kind of odd. My father wanted me to follow in his footsteps, in medicine, but I'm the firstborn son, right? So I should follow in the father's footsteps, at primogenito. But I wanted to do science, and so I went to university and did a bachelor's degree in physics, and then went on to a PhD in physics and space sciences. And I love what I do. It's a lot of fun. And in my mind, being a professor is the best job possible. Now, for other people, it's not the best job possible. I've had students who tell me when they're graduating, I know that you really enjoy your job and your life and everything, but I'm going to do something different because I see how you live and I don't want to live that way. Because I work all the time. And now I work because I'm self-driven, right? But you'll find me working on weekends, and it's like vacation. What exactly is this thing called vacation, right? My wife gets on my case for that. But we as professors and scientists have to work very hard in a very competitive environment to be successful. And so, yeah, I work extremely hard, and I don't have, well, I'm never completely off, if you will. Even when I go on vacation, I've got my laptop with me, and I work on some stuff. And I've had students who see that and say, I don't want that. I want to go to my job and then come home and be done and just have that time for me and my family and my interests and things like that. And that's fine. Everybody's got different priorities, right? So for me, this is the best job possible. For somebody else, it would be the most horrible job.
All right, thank you. So your research is largely based or focused on solar wind magnetosphere coupling. Can you give us a brief synopsis as to what this is or how it affects our society today?
Okay, so you know that the Earth has a magnetic field. The Earth
Yeah.
is a giant magnet, and that magnetic field extends into space. Now, the sun also has a magnetic field, and the sun is composed of electrically conducting gas for the most part, and that gas is boiling and churning, and because it's electrically conducting, it's dragging the magnetic field around, and that heats up the atmosphere of the sun to very, very high temperatures, like 1,000,000 degrees. And the sun's gravity can't hold it down because it's so hot. So that electrically conducting gas plus the magnetic field that it's dragging with it expands into space. And that's what we call the solar wind. So this solar wind fills all of the space between the planets flowing out from the sun. And when it hits something like the Earth that has its own magnetic field, Earth's magnetic field pushes back. And then the solar wind flows past it, and Earth's magnetic field looks like a big comet in space for the same reason that a comet looks like a comet, because the wind is blowing past and dragging our magnetic field out into a long tail. So that region in the solar wind where the Earth's magnetic field controls stuff, that's called the magnetosphere, our magnetosphere. Other planets that have magnetic fields have magnetospheres as well. Normally, for most of human history, it really didn't matter. The only visible effect of this was the aurora, the northern and the southern lights that are produced by the electric currents that are flowing through the Earth's upper atmosphere that are part of this big system of containing the Earth's magnetic field inside the magnetosphere. But all of this involves electricity and magnetism. So once our technology started using electricity and magnetism, we started running into what we call space weather, changes in that space environment that can affect our technology. And electricity, magnetism, and electromagnetic technology is absolutely fundamental to us. People don't even think about how important it is unless they lose power. Remember the big storm?
Yeah,
The rolling outages.
Right? How much time did you lose power? Did you lose power?
I lost it for it was like a day or two actually. And it was so bad. We were not prepared for it.
No. Can you imagine losing power for a month?
crazy.
I was telling her that same night, I was losing my mind. I could not no, I can't imagine.
Well, our power grid is vulnerable to space weather. If there's a huge magnetic storm, we could have power outage, and there have been power outages in the past due to magnetic storms. So this is one area that, we have forgotten to live like 19th century people. Nobody in our society, none of you in your school would know how to live like a 19th century person without electricity and without all of the, electric lights and, the water pressure. You had the pumps back in the day because there were no electric pumps producing water pressure that would bring water to your house. So, all of these things, our civilization just depends completely on this. And then, of course, I bet you all have got one of these, right? Who doesn't, right? If I leave my cell phone at home, I feel like I've walked out naked, right? Isn't this true? You feel like, oh my God, what am I going to do without my phone? We are so connected with our phones, with our technology, but those things rely on space technology, on satellites to, carry some of the signals. There was a magnetic storm back, when was it? It was in the 1990s sometimes. I forget exactly. Maybe it was 1998, where a satellite that was carrying 90% of the pager traffic in the United States was damaged and went offline. And so now we don't use pagers so much anymore because now we're using cell phones. But back then, a pager that would send short text messages, that was used by lots and lots of people to communicate and to get emergency messages and things like this. And there was a day the pagers died and people are like, oh my God, what am I going to do here? So it's, our involvement with technology is just going to continue to increase more and more. And that technology is vulnerable to these changes in the space environment driven by changes on the sun. And so that's why we need to predict space weather. Is you can't get out of the way. It's like, I used to live in Florida. I still have a house in Florida. My mom is in Florida, my sister and her husband, so got a strong Florida connection. And in Florida, you look at the hurricane data center. You look to see what's out there and if there's anything coming towards you during hurricane season. Or, all the people in Puerto Rico, they're very aware of hurricane. In fact, the word huracán is a Taino word from the Caribbean, from Puerto Rico, that when the Spanish came and they had the first one of these big storms, they're like, oh, what was that? And the Indians said huracán, which was the god of wind. And that's how the word entered into Spanish, huracán, from their hurricane in English. So you need to know when these things are coming, because then you can prepare. You can't get out of the way. But if you don't even know that they're coming, you have what happened in Galveston in 1906, that the city was wiped out and 6,000 people died because of a hurricane, because they didn't have the ability to predict. So that's what we're working on now, is the ability to predict these space hurricanes and to give the adequate warning to secure our technology.
Okay, so we do know that you were the author and co-author of over 120 peer-reviewed publications, as well as the popular science book, Storms from the Sun. What has encouraged you to remain productive and obviously very dominant in your field?
Well, there's a phrase called publish or perish. You have to keep on, the role of a scientist is to generate knowledge. And the role of a professor, in addition to that, is to lead students to the point where they can generate new knowledge. That's what becoming a PhD means, is that student, when they earn their PhD degree, that signifies that they are now able to ask and answer scientific questions on the edge of what we know and add to knowledge. And the way you communicate that to other people is through peer-reviewed publications. You write a paper, you send it to a journal, the editor sends it out to other experts in the field, and they complain about things in the paper that you have to fix, and sometimes you have to argue. Somebody says, well, I don't think this is right, and you argue why it is, and you go through this process, and finally the paper is published. And then other colleagues around the world can read that paper, and then that adds to our understanding. It adds to our knowledge of a particular field of science. And this is true for all areas of science. So, a scientist who's stopped publishing is basically not doing much science anymore, because doing science includes communicating it, and that is to publish. And so, that's just part of my job, part of what I do. Publish, go to conferences, and communicate with other colleagues and tell them what are the latest results, and work with students and bring them to the point where they are now generating new knowledge.
So you have won numerous awards for your work in both space physics and science education. So it can be said your achievements and are nearly unparalleled. What advice would you give students who are interested in STEM?
Well, yeah, I've been very successful. I wouldn't say it's unparalleled. I know lots of people who are far more accomplished and smarter than I am, but I also have done pretty well for myself.
You've done very
I,
well.
I would say,
Just
Amazing.
credit yourself.
for students who are really interested in doing science, um, study science. But that also includes mathematics, and don't forget about language arts. You know, obviously, a large part of what I actually do for a living is writing. I mean, I have to write proposals that have to be funded by the government after being reviewed by my colleagues, where I have to make the case that the science we want to do is we've got a good plan for it, and that we deserve to get the money when only 10 or 15% of the proposals will be funded. So that's what supports me, supports my graduate students. Graduate students, by the way, in physics have their tuition and paid, and then they get a stipend. So they're paid to get their PhD, but that money comes from the grants that I win in these competitions, like from NASA or from the National Science Foundation. So to do that, and also to write good scientific papers, I have to write well. So all students who are interested in science should not forget about that part of it, that writing well and being able to speak and present are important parts of that scientific enterprise. And so just pursue it and determine for yourself if it's something that you really, really like, understanding that to be a successful scientist, it's simply not easy. Actually, nothing that's worthwhile is particularly easy. And so you do have to work very hard, and you might have some setbacks. And if you have setbacks, just reassess and think about, is this really what I want to do? And if it's really what you want to do, you just continue. And also look for people who can help you. Look to build that social network of senior people who can point you in the right direction or make you aware of opportunities. I mean, here at UT Arlington, we have lots and lots of undergraduates doing research. And in fact, I've had undergraduates who started with me when they were freshmen, who found out that they could do research in my group, and they come and talk to me, and I say, sure. There's one young lady who started with me as a freshman, and she is now a graduate student doing her PhD work at Cornell University and has won many awards along the way, even as an undergraduate. So there are lots and lots of opportunities. Work hard, but also realize you don't have to do it by yourself. You can't do it by yourself. Find people to connect with. Go to a university where there are opportunities for undergraduates to do research, and talk to professors about it, just like you guys are doing, right? I got an email from a teacher at your school and which said, would you be willing to talk with the students? Of course I would. I love to do that kind of stuff. So students who are interested in science should find people like me, and there are lots of people like me who just love to talk with students, love to work with students, love to help students.
So since we are like currently celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month, it does end tomorrow, I believe. How has Hispanic heritage affected your choice to go deep into the realm of physics, if it has like a correlation?
There's no real connection between, my Puerto Rican background and my desire to do physics. Those things are kind of separate. But you always bring your whole self to any enterprise. And so in my scientific work, it has meant that I'm always particularly interested in making connections with colleagues in Latin America. In fact, there's an organization called ALAGE, which is the Association of Latin American Geospace Scientists. And I participate in ALAGE. I go to those meetings, and it's great. I mean, scientific talks and scientific papers are generally written in English. There are journals in other languages, but they're not well read. And every scientist learns English. I mean, that's why, I can talk to colleagues from Japan and India and other countries around the world. They all speak English. But what's fun about the Alaga meeting is, yes, all the talks are in English, but then you go out in the hallways and everybody's talking Spanish or Portuguese. And it's just, I love that environment. Just love it. So I've always taken the opportunity to connect to people in Latin America with my research. And in particular, I have a colleague in Brazil who's actually Peruvian, even though he's been in Brazil a long time. He and I talk in Spanish all the time. But because I go to Brazil a lot, that's why I learned Portuguese. And I can now even give scientific talks in Portuguese. And so that's how sort of that part of my background has played out, is my interest in those things. Also, I know people in Spain at the University of Alcalá, which is outside of Madrid. And I've worked with them and published, with them. And this past summer, they actually held a summer school for graduate students. It was online, virtual, unfortunately, but it was called the Iberian Summer School because they're doing it in collaboration with a university in Portugal. That's one of the oldest universities in Europe, actually, in Coimbra. And next summer, they're going to do it live. And I'm going. I was an instructor for this one. I'm going next summer because I want to go back. I've only been to Portugal once, but it's great. And why did I get involved? Why did I volunteer to, do extra work and to give, a tutorial lecture at this? In part, it's because, they're from that Latin background, right? And so I can resonate with that. I can connect with that. Just in the same way that, I have colleagues here who are of Chinese origin, and they've got many collaborations with colleagues in China. And there's that cultural affinity. So I have that same cultural affinity for Latin America, for Spain and Portugal. And the funny thing about Brazil is Brazil has this Caribbean feel to it. The music, the food, it's actually much closer to Puerto Rico in some cultural ways than, say, Argentina, which is very European. So that's how that part of me has played out in the science. And the thing is that being a successful scientist has given me the opportunity to travel around the world, to make these connections, to work with colleagues, and to shape my work in the way that I want to do it. And I can continue to do that as long as I work hard and I'm successful. And that's the key. You have to work hard and be successful. Then you earn the freedom to do things. And at the same time, I never forget that, I get these wonderful opportunities funded by the taxpayer. So that's why I'm particularly interested and have been for so long in working in education. I've done so much work in education. And, if I get an email from a teacher saying, will you come and talk to our students? My answer is always yes.
Are there any final notes you'd like to share? Anything that we didn't particularly ask that you think is important for us and other people to know?
Yeah. Everybody needs to know some science, because you're going to have to make decisions, particularly medical decisions, that might require some kind of scientific understanding, things that will affect you personally in the future. Just in the same way that everyone needs to have some math background. I mean, you need to know how much is in your checking account and, what's coming in, what's going out, to do your taxes, all of these things. So there are certain things that all of us as citizens in this country, as people who are having to deal with complex systems that manage our lives, we have to be able to do these things. So I would say to everybody, along with being able to read and write well, being able to do mathematics, to just do life tasks, science is one of those things. You don't have to be a scientist to appreciate science, to be interested in things, to watch Nova shows on PBS, or actually I watch them on YouTube. I think that's what most people do now. I don't really watch TV. I watch stuff on YouTube or Netflix, but to watch the occasional documentary, to read things, to be interested in science, it's a good thing. And everybody should have that interest. And for those for whom it's more than just that passing interest, go ahead and try it. Do your, if you want to pursue a scientific career, look into it, see if that's really what you want to do, and take the kinds of courses that prepare you for that at the high school level, then go to university and try to connect with people who will help you enter the scientific community. And then you can decide, is this really for me or not? Like my student who was finishing a PhD, who decided, no, I want to do something else. And that's perfectly fine. I'm happy for this, for him, because I know that he's living a great life. And that's marvelous. I don't want to replicate myself. But for people who want to do that, it's there, it's achievable. You have to recognize the amount of work that goes into it. But any kind of success you're going to have to work hard and recognize that hard work is essential. And if you don't work hard, you're not going to be able to turn whatever opportunities come your way into a success, right? Because opportunities come, and that's the luck part of it, right? To some degree, you try to make your luck, but sometimes it's just luck of things that come and land in front of you. The question is, can you take advantage of that? Can you do what's needed to turn that opportunity into a success?
Wise words, Dr. Lopez. So this is like out of the physics realm. I was gonna ask you, we were talking a lot about traveling. What would you say are your top 3 favorite places to travel to?
Oh, well, I love Brazil, just in general. I mean, I've got several favorite cities. I mean, well, Spain, I'll go to Spain at the drop of a hat. I know Barcelona and Madrid both quite well. Buenos Aires is a lovely city, and I've been there many times. Singapore, I love Singapore. Now in Singapore, the language is English, although people speak Chinese and Hindi and lots of other languages. But Singapore is fabulous. Japan is great. I've been to Japan many times, and I'm just itching for them to allow people to enter without quarantine, so I can go visit colleagues there and also see my daughter, who I've not seen in over a year now, since she moved to Japan. I mean, I see her on WhatsApp. We talk that way, but I look forward to going and visiting with her. Yeah, so I've got many favorite places, but actually, yeah, my top favorite places overseas are places where I speak the language.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us. We know it's a Monday and it's early, but still we really appreciate it. And we hope to share this recording with other people, because you said a lot of interesting things, and I think people can take that into consideration. So thank you so
Well,
much.
thank you.
Thank
And
you.
again, for any student who's interested in science and really wants to try to get into research early as an undergraduate, UT Arlington's a great place to come to do that. It's not only just the physics department, although we're particularly good, but there are other departments in the College of Science that are very welcoming to undergraduates who are interested in doing research. And that's a great way to sort of learn science by doing science.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Bye. You just click there.